I just wanted to get my degree and leave. I had no idea that damn university would be the one thing I'd never be able to leave behind. I walked the same halls every day, passed the same rooms, saw the same faces. Everything felt normal. But then I started noticing something, a tension in the air, a kind of heaviness, like the walls themselves were hiding something, like the edges of reality were starting to fray, right there in that familiar building. It was a Monday morning, one of those boring lectures you just survive through. I was sitting at the back of the classroom, fighting to keep my eyes open, when she walked in. Nothing about her stood out at first, but there was something about the way she moved, like she was almost invisible. No one seemed to notice her, but I did. She didn't look sad, not exactly, but there was something in her eyes, a weight. Not the kind of blank stare you see in someone distracted or tired. It was the kind of look that carries something unseen, something heavy, and it felt like she was the only one who knew what it was. I couldn't explain it, but I started noticing her more. It wasn't attraction, not the usual kind anyway. She was just there. But somehow, it felt like the space around her shifted, like she wasn't standing in the room, but near it, as if she existed slightly out of sync, always a fraction away from everyone else. Every time she walked past me, I felt something in the air, a pressure that didn't belong. I didn't want to watch her, but I couldn't help myself. And in the days that followed, I started seeing her everywhere, not in a stalker way. It was like my brain just knew where she was before I even looked. She moved through the halls silently, like her presence didn't register to the rest of the world. But when our eyes met, even for a second, it felt like the floor dropped from under me. Like I'd left the world and stepped into a place where none of the rules made sense anymore. Then one afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. The class was dragging on, and I felt suffocated. I stood up and told the professor I needed some air. On the way out, I passed her again. But something was different this time. Right after I left, I saw her get up too. She walked out a few seconds after me. That stirred something in me. Curiosity, but deeper than that. Like a warning wrapped in an obsession. I ducked behind a pillar and watched her pass. This time, she didn't look at me. I didn't feel that usual pressure in the air. Instead, she looked disconnected. Like she didn't belong to the hallway or to the moment. And worse, like I didn't either. I don't know why I did it, but I followed her. She walked toward the far end of the campus, to an area I'd barely been to. There was an old hallway that led to a door, one I had never seen open in all my years there. I always thought it was some kind of maintenance room. She stopped in front of it, looked around once, like she was checking to make sure no one was watching, and then she went in. I froze. How did she have access to that room? What could she possibly be doing in there? The door closed behind her. I stared at it. It looked the same as always, but now it felt like it was waiting. I stood there for what felt like forever. Then, I reached for the handle. At some point, I almost turned back. Something deep inside told me I'd already gone too far. The door wouldn't budge. It was locked. Maybe that should have been a sign. Maybe it was a warning. But a few minutes later, the lock clicked. The door creaked open. Just a crack. That was all. But it was enough to stop me cold. I don't know how to explain it, but it wasn't just fear. It was like my body recognized something I hadn't even processed yet. The air around me felt wrong. Dense. Like I had just stepped up to a threshold I wasn't meant to cross. But I pushed it open. Slowly. The room was empty. Or at least, it looked empty. There were shelves, covered in dust. Books so old they were falling apart. But everything felt off. Not just old. Wrong. Like these objects didn't belong to this world. They looked familiar, but slightly distorted, like someone had tried to copy a real room from memory and messed it up. At the far end of the room, there was another door. Smaller. Crooked. Like it had been installed after the room was built, or maybe it just wasn't supposed to be there. I took a step closer. That's when I heard it. A voice. Deep. Rough. Grotesque. Not loud, but enough to freeze my blood. I couldn't understand the words. They weren't in English. They weren't in anything I'd ever heard. It sounded ancient, guttural, rhythmic, like some kind of language that wasn't meant to be spoken by humans. I wanted to run. Every part of my body told me to get out. But curiosity won. Again. I leaned toward the door, just enough to peek through the gap. My heart nearly exploded. It was a classroom, but not like anything I'd ever seen. It looked like someone, or something, had tried to replicate a human classroom, but got it horribly wrong. The desks were twisted, warped. The floor slanted downward in a way that made no physical sense. And the blackboard. It wasn't a blackboard. It was a hole. An endless pitch-black void. A portal, almost, that seemed to pull the light around it inward, like it was alive. The room was dimly lit by nothing I could see. There were no bulbs, no lamps, but there was light, just enough to show outlines, but never enough to reveal everything. And sitting at the desks were them. Figures, like students, but they weren't. Pale, colorless, unmoving. Their eyes were completely black, expressionless, like their souls had been scooped out. They sat still, like statues made of flesh. And in the center, she stood. Not the girl. Something else. The teacher. Or whatever it was. Tall. Unnatural. Female-shaped, but wrong. Her skin was stretched, grayish. Her eyes burned red, filled with a hatred so raw it felt ancient. She spoke in that incomprehensible language, one phrase at a time. And as she did, she pointed at the black void behind her, the board, and exhaled a thick, black smoke. But the smoke didn't just vanish. It twisted in the air, forming shapes, like it was illustrating her lecture, like it was alive. I stood frozen, watching. Behind her, I saw a map, but not of anything on Earth. It was full of jagged lines, symbols I didn't recognize, and landmasses that looked like they belonged to a different planet altogether. I only looked for a few seconds, but it felt like hours. Then, she stopped talking, looked straight at one of the motionless students. No one moved. Then, the figure at the desk started convulsing, jerking violently, like something had just crawled under its skin. The teacher stepped forward, slow, deliberate, and without hesitation. She devoured it, whole, like it was made of paper. I nearly passed out. I slammed the door shut and stumbled backward, heart racing, sweat pouring down my face. What the hell was this place? What kind of reality had I just walked into? Then another door in the far corner opened, one I hadn't noticed before. More creatures stepped in. Tall. Silent. Dressed in black. Their movements were stiff. Mechanical. Like security guards. But twisted. Off in some way I couldn't put into words. They looked human. But I knew they weren't. They scanned the room slowly. Were they looking for me? I dropped to the floor, crawling behind an old bookcase. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't move. Eventually, they left, and I ran. I sprinted to the door I had entered through, but it was gone. Just gone. There was only a wall. I panicked, searched the shelves, the floor, the walls, for a window, a gap, anything. But the room had turned into a trap, a space with no exit, a box in a different dimension. I was trapped. Out of options, I turned back toward the small door, the one that led to the classroom. I didn't want to open it again, but there was a gap, I looked, and I saw her. The girl from my class, but different. Younger somehow. Paler. But I knew those eyes. I'd recognize them anywhere. And in that moment, one thought took over everything else. If she's still here, maybe she knows the way out. And then, our eyes met again. When our eyes met again, I instantly looked away and backed up in fear. I ducked behind the shelves, heart pounding so loud I thought it would give me away. It was her, the same girl from my class. I was sure of it. But here, she felt like something else. She still wore the same face, but whatever lived behind it was different. I stayed hidden, watching. One by one, those twisted students left the classroom. Even the teacher, that massive, horrific figure, vanished into the blackness like smoke evaporating into itself. And she was the only one left, the girl. My mind was split in two. One part of me screamed to run. The other needed answers. I stood up, walked to the door. I knocked, gently. Not out of politeness, but because deep down, I felt like I was asking permission to enter hell. She turned and looked at me. Same eyes, same gaze. But this time, it felt like she saw everything. Like she already knew what I had seen, what I had felt, and even how it would end. "You shouldn't have come here," she said softly. But her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't even surprised. It was tired. I stood there, frozen. I wanted to ask her a million things, but the words felt stuck in my throat. So, the only ones that came out were desperate. "What is this place? Where am I? Why are you here?" She looked down, and for the first time, I saw sadness in her expression. Not fear, resignation. "You're in Xarathiel." The name hit me like a whisper carved into stone. It felt ancient. Like a word people weren't supposed to know. Like something buried deep beneath language itself. Something the world had tried to forget. So this is what? Another dimension? A parallel universe? I asked, trying to rationalize what I couldn't even describe. She shrugged, her eyes still locked on mine. "It's all of that, and none of it," she said. "Xarathiel is what's left when the real world stops trying to hide the truth. It's what's behind the curtain you're not supposed to pull back. The underside of what you call reality." I felt sick. "And you? Are you from here?" I asked, my voice barely holding together. "I've been on both sides," she said, "and I've never belonged to either." Her answer hit me like glass shattering in my chest. I didn't want to understand, but I did. "I need to leave. I can't stay here. How do I get out?" She took a long breath, the kind of breath you take when you're about to say something that hurts more than it helps. "Everyone wants to leave," she said, "but leaving doesn't mean escaping." "What do you mean?" She stepped closer, not threatening, just close enough for her voice to soften. "Even if you get out of here, this place doesn't get out of you." Those words, they didn't sound like a warning. They sounded like a sentence. "But you brought me here," I said. "I saw you go into that room. You knew the way." "I didn't bring you," she said, gently. "You came because something inside you was ready. You followed because you were already beginning to see. And once you've seen, you can't unsee." I swallowed hard. My throat felt like sandpaper. "You said you've been on both sides. Then why did you stay?" She hesitated, just for a second. Then she looked me in the eyes and said, "Because it's easier to accept what Xarathiel is than to pretend it was never real." I didn't know what to say. So, You're trapped here? No, she said. I'm a part of this place, and it's a part of me. She turned and pointed to the back of the room. There, where before there had only been a wall, a small door had appeared. Plain, faint, like it had been waiting for me the whole time. That's your way out, she said. I stared at it, at her, at everything. If I go through it, will I be okay? You'll be out, she said. But you won't be the same. And even if you try to forget, you won't. Come with me, I asked. It was the only thing I could think to say. She smiled, but it was a sad smile. Worn. Hollow. Like she'd smiled that same way 1,000 times before. My story here started long before yours, she said. And it's not done yet. I just stood there. I didn't cry, but I wanted to. She turned away and walked into the shadows of the room, disappearing into them like she belonged there. And I stepped through the door. Stepping through that door felt like falling. I didn't walk. I didn't crawl. I was just pulled. Like something had reached inside me, taken hold, and ripped me backward through space. And then, I was outside. The campus, the familiar buildings, the sky, people walking, laughing, talking. Everything looked exactly the same, but nothing felt the same. The world around me was misaligned, like it had been nudged slightly out of place, half a degree off. People's voices lagged behind their mouths. Leaves on trees moved in a strange, slow rhythm. Everything was just a little bit wrong. I tried to shake it off. Went back home. Locked myself in my room. Sat on my bed in silence, staring at the floor, not even knowing what time it was. I looked at my phone. No new messages. Checked the mirror. My eyes looked off. Still mine. But not really. It was like something else had come back with me, and it had decided to stay behind my eyes. I tried to sleep. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that room. The endless blackboard. The red eyes of the teacher. The smoke that formed moving images. The map of a place that had no right to exist. I kept telling myself it was a dream. That I was stressed, overworked, sleep-deprived. That I'd imagined it. But deep down, I knew. The next day I went back to class. She wasn't there. The girl. The one who had led me, even if by accident, to Xarathiel. I waited. Pretended to take notes. Glanced at the door every few minutes. But she never walked in. At the break, I asked a few classmates, "Hey, have you guys seen the new girl? The one who used to sit in the back row?" They looked at me, puzzled. "What girl?" "You know, pale skin, dark hair, quiet. She's been coming to class all week." They exchanged glances. "No one new's joined the class," one of them said. "You sure you're not thinking of someone from another section?" That's when it started to collapse. I spent the rest of the day searching for her. In the halls, the dorm listings, social media, student records, anything. Nothing. It was like she had never existed. But I knew she had. I felt it. And that was the scariest part. That every piece of evidence said I had imagined it, but my soul remembered otherwise. The days after that were a different kind of horror. Silent. Slow. Constant. I started noticing things. Little, insignificant things. That felt off. Colors were muted. Light didn't fall the same way. My classmates' voices sometimes echoed slightly, even when they spoke right next to me. Like their words had to pass through something else before reaching me. My room began to feel alive. At night, I swear the walls were breathing. I don't mean metaphorically. I mean literally. Expanding. Contracting. with a faint hum, like lungs buried inside the drywall. I began hearing a noise. Low, deep, continuous. A hum that didn't come from anywhere but never went away. I couldn't describe it to anyone. It was just there, like it had always been part of the air. And sometimes, I saw her, in the window of a passing car, reflected in the glass of a bus stop, on the far side of a crowd. But every time I turned my head, she was gone. I began to wonder if I had really made it back, or if Xarathiel had just come back with me. Weeks later, I had to visit the registrar's office to sort out some paperwork. A friend of mine worked there, someone I trusted, and something inside me said, "Ask." I gave him her full name, the one she had told me in that place. "Can you check if this student's registered here?" I asked, casually. He typed, his brow furrowed. "That's weird," he said. "She's in the system, but this record is really old." "How old?" He looked at me. 62 years. My blood went cold. "She was enrolled," he continued, "but never graduated. Dropped out under weird circumstances. Just vanished." "Can I see the file?" I asked. He turned the screen toward me. I didn't even need to scroll. It was, right there, under Place of Birth. Origin. Xarathiel. I shut the file. My breath caught in my chest. My hands went numb. I left the office without saying a word. I couldn't feel the ground under my feet. Since that day, my life hasn't belonged to me. Now, every day is the same. I wake up. I eat. I talk to people. I act normal. But at night, they come back. The shadows. The teacher with red eyes. The whispering voices in that impossible language. The students with no souls. And her. Always her. Sometimes she's sitting on the edge of my bed, watching me, saying nothing. Sometimes I feel her behind me when I brush my teeth. Sometimes I hear her voice in my dreams, telling me things I don't want to know. I've tried praying. I've tried convincing myself I'm sick, that I imagined it all. But there's one thing I can never forget. One thing she said to me, like a curse sealed in my chest. "Even if you get out, this place doesn't get out of you." And now I understand. Xarathiel isn't a place. It's a residue, a presence, a scar. And I'm just one more soul who never really came back. If you've ever felt like something is watching you, if you've ever walked into a room and sensed that something had changed, not visibly, but in a way your brain can't explain, if you've ever met someone that no one else seems to remember, then maybe you've already brushed up against a crack in Xarathiel. And if you have, don't stay silent. Write it down. Say what you saw. Because sometimes, speaking is the only way not to disappear completely. But be careful. Because sometimes, remembering is what binds you to it forever.